All right, we're here for a very special episode of Gaming Insight. I'm Steve Saylor, and I'm joined with MikeTheQuad. Mike, how are you?
Doing fantastic. Actually, recovered a little bit, I guess, from
Good,
TwitchCon.
good. I am also in that kind of a semi-recovered state of TwitchCon, which is what we're going to be talking about because TwitchCon kind of went under fire a little bit. This past weekend, we were both there celebrating TwitchCon's 10th anniversary, and specifically the North American version of TwitchCon. And we, as disabled attendees, we wanted to be able to talk about it. Now, we won't talk about the Imaru situation, the security situation, because we really don't have a lot of insight that could have changed basically anything or have any sort of suggestions for Dan Clancy to essentially change that. I mean, security and safety is extremely important,
100%.
even including for accessibility, because we want to make sure that disabled people are also secure and safe while going to a convention. And sometimes disabled people can be overlooked, but we just don't have any specific insight into the security plans or how much security did Twitch had hired for this event and the response of that and all that stuff. So we won't be talking about that, but we want to talk about our experiences at TwitchCon as disabled attendees and what it was like. So, Mike, I want to ask you overall, just kind of your general thoughts. How accessible did you find TwitchCon for you? And you could be as brutally honest or as whatever you want to say. I will say, clarify, I am a Twitch ambassador, so there is that, but I'm not speaking on behalf of Twitch or anything like that. These are our own opinions. So, Mike, take it away.
Right. So my first TwitchCon actually was in 19. I think that was right before the pandemic happened, and then I didn't go until they announced it at Vegas. But from when I first went to San Diego to TwitchCon, it seemed fairly accessible, at least with like the expo floor where they have very low pile. The carpet is not as bad as like Atlanta. Oh man, Atlanta is horrible. But I feel
We're
like
talking
there
about
could
MagicCon
be
specifically for Atlanta.
yeah, MagicCon over in Atlanta that I went to like a couple weeks before TwitchCon. San Diego, I think at least the carpet is not as bad as I would, have thought it would be. The expo floor was good. It was where I seemed it to be from when I first got there. And this is like, it's like because they're in TwitchCon, it's certain exhibits I found that weren't like people in that have a that I guess not even the height difference, but just like wheelchair access for exhibits. Like, say if they wanted to, hey, come try our game. A lot of the exhibits or booths don't have anything for like people for sitting. It's all like you got to stand, and it's like at a certain height and it's fixed. There might have been a couple of them. I know with like certain booths they had like, this is the desk setup, so then that kind of like made it a little bit more accessible because just like Elgato is like an example. They always have like a desk out there and it has like, here's all of our stuff, come check it out, like how it would be when you're at home, because you're not going to be just like
standing
or
height desks, but they also do have, as an example of this is what your desk would look like, and it is at sort of sitting height essentially.
And so I've seen that. There were a couple exhibits, and I need to go back because I did a vlog, filmed for my vlog on a 360 cam, so hopefully it was on there. It's funny that how we were talking about earlier with the Minecraft. It's the second thing, but there's like a little exhibit that they had, and I saw that where the exit was, it was actually a step. So I was like,
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay.
I was like, that's kind of weird. It's like, how am I supposed to exit if I was in my chair? And you get corralled in this line because you go through certain stations and they want to move the line along. But like, imagine if I came up to that and it was just me, there wouldn't have been like any way without getting physical assistance to get me up down that step.
Sure. Yeah,
And
and
I
I
don't know
think
if
that's
you
kind of more in like it's if there's no ADA, well, I don't want to say ADA. If there's no, because ADA doesn't necessarily fully apply to a company, a private company running a convention, but if the company running it, which in this case would be Twitch, had accessibility requirements for exhibition booths to be accessible, like we said, having game stations at wheelchair height, having making sure that the carpet isn't super thick, or having adaptive controllers, or the ability to be able to adjust any settings within a demo of a game, stuff like that, like could really help make the booths more universally accessible. And I'd say in some cases it can that we see that, in some cases they're not. Some cases, actually, the booths are just kind of accessible without really like anyone making it specifically accessible or deciding it to be. It just so happened that what they chose for their layout, it was accessible.
That's what I kind of would like for people to create, some type of layout where it's like we at some point in our lives, hopefully, I'm wanting to see that there wouldn't be have to be labeled as accessible options. It's just an option. You know, it's universally taken care of for like every single demographic of person.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the show floor, for the most part, was relatively accessible.
I think say that, yeah.
Minus, like you said, a few things with some of the booths and stuff like that. And I would say, like, yeah, that's kind of my thoughts in general of just the overall con. The TwitchCon was relatively accessible, and they have even made some improvements over previous years. I think Vegas was probably like the worst when it came to accessibility, but they're due to limited scooter availability, just the layout of the convention center, even have like the lineup outside for the accessibility was under the direct Nevada sun. So there was nothing for helping them out. And so there was a lot of issues there that were also addressed from disabled attendees afterwards. And so they had made improvements overall. I would say that like maybe not necessarily something that completely stood out, but it was enough that I remember this being like last year being at San Diego, it being accessible as well. Like it didn't seem like it was a marketable difference between, oh, this wasn't accessible, this was. One thing I did notice was that that at least getting into the convention, there was a dedicated accessible line, which was great. They even had a security guard who was also disabled. You know, I don't know if you saw Mike, but it was
I saw two of them.
Yeah, like they were in a wheelchair. They were the ones who were going through your bags and making sure that you weren't bringing anything you weren't supposed to. And I thought that was great for representation wise. That was awesome for that.
I saw another security person that had a limb difference in like the right arm.
That's cool. And then I would even say that throughout every single event or panel or anything that had a stage or a presentation, there in the audience, there were clearly identifiable, accessible seating that were throughout the entire like audience. Like there was some, there wasn't just a section.
My God.
It was throughout, like some at the back, some near the front, especially some of the front for blind folks. And there always were they had like these kind of like almost like these,
it's like an apron,
that said accessible seating. And there was always two seats together, so that way if you were disabled, you can have someone sit beside you if you had your companion with you. And that was pretty much in every room that had an audience attending it.
Yes,
that was something that I was new that I really, really appreciated.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that I think is probably getting under a lot of controversy, that basically people saw this and thought the entire con was inaccessible, was in regards to the Twitch rival stage. And there was a specific tweet that was put out. I won't show it on screen, but I will read it out. It's from username Sunset from Stars, who posted this on October 19th. It said, "Hey, at Twitch, this is Scar. He is a disabled Minecraft streamer who just won a Twitch Rivals event, but unfortunately, he was unable to get on stage due to it being inaccessible. The Twitch community would appreciate it if you were to make the venues accessible for everyone." Jade Den followed up with, they also had a bit before Dodgebolt where all the players were to get on stage, but Scar was unable to participate. I hope you guys can fix this in the future. So this spread pretty much a lot around the same time as along the kind of same times as the Imaru situation. And Mike, I want to talk about this specifically because while this incident specifically was inaccessible, this is not a sign of the entire con was inaccessible. But I want to hear your thoughts on this specifically. What did you think of this Twitch Rivals Minecraft incident?
I felt that out of anything optic wise, you would have Twitch Rivals, which is one of the competitive pillars of what Twitch is with creators.
And a big part of TwitchCon in general.
My gosh, yeah. And you would have that to be accessible. I don't know where the disconnect happened because the panels, they both had ramps, PJ Sugar and the Give Please. I like the Give Please a little bit better because it was behind the stage instead of like...
Yes, instead of in front of it, yeah.
It felt a little bit embarrassing because I was like, I know I'm going to struggle for a sec, but I know like people are going to want to help me, but I know I was going to able to like get up on the ramp and all that stuff.
And I would even say like even the larger theaters, like the Glitch Theater, which is their kind of big main stage, that is like I've been in previous Glitch stage events, and there is also ramps to get up to that stage too. So I did see that.
I just don't know like what was the disconnect of it. I hope that there's like some type of committee. I'm not too sure if there's like a committee that's just for the layout of the con and exhibits to say, hey, this is an accessible, like it could be labeled as accessible in this aspect. Because for those who aren't familiar with accessibility, it's a whole spectrum of disabilities and giving people access just to be able to participate. It's not about giving a special privilege or anything like that. We just want to be where everyone else is at and have the same access as everybody else.
I agree, and yes, that is kind of a big issue, of course, when someone is not given that equal access, like Scar unfortunately had to go through. And I'm happy that at least that it was being brought to people's attention. But it's something that I've been seeing sort of that misinformation being spread of. I even saw like in some big streamers chats who were talking about TwitchCon, I saw some comments of people saying, "Oh, the whole con was inaccessible." It's like, no. It was, but it's not to say that it wasn't without its issues,
right?
Like this as well. One of our examples that we both kind of experienced was one out of the 3 main elevators in the convention center was sort of not working, but also worked at some point, because we heard from later on from a friend of ours that it was working, but it was out of service whenever we tried. And
well, the time that we were trying too was that we were the first panel after the opening ceremony.
Yes.
On Friday, which is the first day of the con, right at when it's supposed to be super busy. And and that elevator was like one of the key points of travel for those who needed the elevator to get access to the Give Please and the PJ Sugar, the Unity Guild Lounge.
It was like, right in the center of the convention center where all of the main kind of stuff that we had access to, that we had to get access to, was right there. Otherwise, it was on the far ends of the convention center.
I have a story for the elevator trip too, because we were on our way to go to see you for Dragon Games. By the way, Dungeons and Disabled. We had the Dragons game. It was at 11:30 Friday, and it was so amazing. I'd love to talk more about it, but though I digress. So my friend Rez, we went through security, and we were making our way, up to where we want to the Give Please stage. We ended up down in the expo floor looking for the elevator and asking staff to say, okay, where these elevators are at. And they would just point us out towards the convention and point in the direction. When we get up to the elevator, first we find that it was blocked off. And the first person that came to us as we were trying to cross the lines, and they're saying that elevator's off limits. And
Oof.
I was already, I was cutting it for time because I didn't want to be late to the Dragon Games panel, right? So I had to sternly say that I'm going to take this elevator because there is no clear distinction of where the other elevators are at. Um, all the elevators are out on the outside of the expo floor, so you have to go on the carpet. For somebody that suffers from like chronic fatigue, that really values expending energy for like purpose,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to aimlessly go around and try to find this elevator. That was something that I saw on the maps of TwitchCon, trying to find the elevator. I don't know if you remember, like, hey, where's the elevator? And we're like, I think this is it.
Yep.
You know, and instead, so I think that's something that we need to highlight to like add on as a critique for improving accessibility is just visual markers, paths, like markers on the floor, like, hey, this way for elevator access, especially because upstairs is the other half of the con.
Yeah. Where pretty
But
much a majority of everything else other than the show floor was.
yeah,
And they
Artist
spread out.
Alley.
Yeah, they spread out across the entire convention center, which if you've ever been to San Diego Convention Center, it is long. It is a massive building, which we get because it's San Diego Comic-Con is kind of like one of the biggest conventions out there. And so they need a large building in order to be able to accommodate. And TwitchCon was able like filled out the pretty much the majority of the building for this year. And yeah, it was something that when you have to go from one end to the convention center to the other just to be able to get elevator access, you're right. It's like if you have like chronic pain or it's just you have limited movement, so you're not able to go as fast. Like you're kind of having to basically run the entire length of the convention center multiple times throughout the day, and that can take a lot out of anybody, regardless of if they're in a wheelchair or if they have a cane or limited movement or even just trying to like someone myself who is like I'm blind and I'm like sometimes I need that elevator access because escalators can be issues for me too. Having to walk one end to the other is just it's not feasible. It's not equal access essentially to things. Like there's stuff. It's stuff like that. I mean, it's not, again, this is not necessarily Twitch's fault. It's the convention center's fault for not being able to have that elevator working 100% of the time.
Right.
But also Twitch is hiring this convention center to also, and that's the thing too, is that a lot of events when they hire a convention center or they rent out the convention center for use of their event, a lot of times they have to rely on the venue's accessibility to be able to kind of cover the ADA regulations they have as an event.
Right.
Unfortunately, though, sometimes it's not the most practical, like ADA regulations.
Yeah.
Yes, there are access, but it may not be the most practical depending on how the event is laid out, how the event is sort of set up. Because they have also their own, like that changes every single time. They have like rooms specifically for certain things like panels and stuff, but it is still up to the people who are renting this place to be able to set up in a way that is as accessible, but it's not necessarily a requirement for them. It has to be an internal requirement. So stuff like that, it's like, yes, Twitch like could have been more active and being like making sure that these things were accessible. That should be part of their checklist, but it's just unfortunate that people would sort of see it as just Twitch's fault and not necessarily the fault.
Yeah, I think a lot of the controversy is misdirected on who to blame.
Sure.
Having this conversation, especially for us who have people with disabilities that utilize these points, we see the access to it, and we want to definitely highlight that there was access to a lot of these things. And it's unfortunate that, with the Twitch Rivals stage, that's high optic.
Mm-hmm.
That's something definitely you would want to take high consideration in, especially if it's going to be casted live. And I think that comes to, I would be interested to see if there was some type of accessibility team, or, you can tap into Twitch ambassadors who have disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's one of the reasons why we would have Twitch ambassadors, is because we want to make sure that they are ensuring that creators are, are in a good environment for them to have that access.
Yeah. I think so. I think so too. And we know that, like, even though this is our experience of the con, and
Right.
for the most part it was accessible, and there's probably certain things that if you're listening or watching to this and you may have heard about or had experienced yourself some little inaccessible thing. It's not to say that those aren't important either. And we only can talk about our specific experience and talking to our friends who are disabled, who have who need access, and we're just in the accessibility. So it's something we are always constantly thinking about. I will say from a general overall perspective, the con was accessible. There are definitely areas of improvement for sure. There always is areas of for improvement, whether that's exhibitor booths or even Twitch's own rival stage, as we talked about. But I think it is something that I think, like, overall, like I said, the seeing the aprons for accessible seating in all the panel rooms, that was something that was due, that hadn't been introduced before, unless it was introduced in Europe, and we never saw that in North America. But it's not to say that Twitch doesn't care about accessibility, because we know that they do, and they do talk to folks who are disabled to find out about accessibility on the platform and at TwitchCon as well. And we encourage everyone, fill out that feedback form if you had issues accessibility wise. The only way that Twitch can know about it is based off of your feedback. So if there's stuff that we didn't mention that was an issue, write that form what it is you experience, because that is just as equally validly important as it was with our stuff.
100%.
Yeah. And there was also, like, we won't talk about too much. There was also, just in regards to just an overall experience of going to a convention.
Yeah,
there was something that happened to us. We had some very inaccessible restaurants, and almost kind of gave us some issues when we were trying to plan out events. We won't name any names, but there was some very valid and like unfortunate circumstances that made some of the restaurants or the places within the Gaslamp side of San Diego that were inaccessible to all of us. And while that is not necessarily, again, Twitch's fault, it's not Twitch's, that's not under their purview, it is still part of the con experience, because where else are you gonna, like, yeah, the convention may be accessible, but where else, like, where are you gonna get food? Where are you gonna sleep? Like, some of the hotels are just not necessarily as accessible as they say they are, or the restaurants may not be as accessible as they say they are. We see the term accessible, and we're like, really? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Like, it's that meme.
Accessible
Are you sure?
to who? Yeah. There's that's a huge thing, is what does accessible, like, having it is thoroughly defined.
Yes.
It's just how restaurants and establishments define it themselves. And it's very different.
Yeah, they may say that it's accessible, but it's like only either just accessible to like the bare minimum, or they say it is without actually like testing it out whether it is. And that's the thing with, like, when we hear about like making standards and guidelines and regulations. Sure, you can have that, and that's a checklist that people can check off, but it's always the bare minimum, and no one goes beyond that. And then they think that, oh, that covers 100% accessibility. And in reality, it's not. And this even goes to TwitchCon itself. It's like, they may say it's accessible, or they may be told it's accessible, but it's only just basically hitting the bare minimum, not 100% of what is needed. Like Mike, coming from you, was there anything that you think could have improved at TwitchCon, or just attending TwitchCon in general? Like, is this like a, hey, this is just another, like, hey, there's another chance for improvement for next year? Like, what do you like? Would you go back to TwitchCon, even with all the stuff that's been happening around TwitchCon, or
100%.
are you kind of like,
I would still go back. It's and mainly it's because of the community, and that's what makes Twitch, is the community. I think like any type of like way that I can have a nexus to, it's like the mecca of being able to go to and see everybody from that you've like looked up to, people that have, like, you've become friends. That's just like a great spot to do everything. um I don't know. I definitely would go back. There's definitely improvements that need to Like I want to know. I would like to see in transparency wise. This is how we go through the process of making sure we have the accessibility, because there's some system there, because like the stages at least that I was on had the accessibility, seeing the different improvements on not just having all the accessible seats on the sides and then all the way up in the front. It's like where almost like kind of like where do you want to sit type of thing, which
Hmm.
is awesome because you're just giving us more options, which is great. Yeah, there's always some things that I would say that would be improvements is um being able to label things a little bit better for where
Yeah.
the elevators are at. Use and probably on for checks, like pre-checks. I don't know how they go through that. Like my background also too is when I was in the army, I did logistics.
Hmm.
So planning and making sure that things were working and like pre-maintenance, all that stuff, that's kind of fell under from what I do. And organizing something like this, it's like I'm trying to see what kind of system was put into place. And unfortunately, we had some things fall through the cracks, like optically, a big thing was the Twitch Rivals stage. That was a glaring thing. But for me, I want to help improve the accessibility because it's just going to make a con experience better for everyone, because like having better signage just helps everybody else, like, oh, this is where we need to go, like for
Hmm.
anybody. And then also like the elevator going into maintenance, that's something that we couldn't like foresee at all, so you can't blame TwitchCon for that. What I do like to highlight though is that every single vendor that I went to, that either sold something or were kind of demonstrate something, were accommodating.
That's good.
Like
That's good.
even though the booth, because when you think about these people who run the booth, they most likely didn't design the booth at all. They just got placed there and
And we're
all
told to
right, run
work
the
it.
booth. Exactly. And so then when these other issues on like design, it's like we don't want to jump the blame, and I understand knee jerk reactions, but taking a tactical pause to kind of just analyze everything and trying to not really put the blame on things, but see where we can improve and who do we talk to make those improvements
Yeah.
happen.
I agree. It is. I mean, I think that there's only a few certain amount of people that actually know that there is people that do work like are dedicated to working accessibility at Twitch. But as far as what is falls under their preview, we don't know whether it's just overall Twitch or is it just a platform or is TwitchCon separate from that. We don't know. But I
Right.
think you're right. I think it's yeah. There's some glaring oversights on certain things like the Twitch rival stage, but for the most part, I think that the things that there was never any like full on blockers of attending TwitchCon from an accessible standpoint. There's
Right.
only like small little things that basically can get overlooked, even with a huge sort of convention staff. If
Yeah.
like if there was one, I think it's just more quality of life improvements to be able to make it that much
Yeah.
better. And that's why we said fill out that feedback form, because the more information that they have, the more cognizant that they can be to those concerns so that they can be able to make up for it in the long run. Now, we don't know what TwitchCon Europe is like. We've heard that there's been market improvement on accessibility there. So we're only talking about North America in this particular sense. Overall, minus a few particular like a few issues, I think it pretty much was an overall accessible event. Is it perfect? No, and I don't think it ever would be, but I did enjoy my experience. I didn't experience any particular inaccessible issues other than the few things here and there that we talked about. But I think I think it definitely not perfect, but it was good.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of really it. Anyway,
Yeah. One, at least one thumbs up,
at least one thumbs up for
at least
sure.
one thumbs up.
We'll talk about two.
Hopefully 2026 will be 2 thumbs up. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, well, that's pretty much all I've got. Mike, any final words, or where can we be able to find you online?
You could find me on pretty much all social medias like Twitter and Blue Sky, Insta, TikTok, and of course here live on Twitch. I actually play on Mondays with Steve here. We're part of the Mana Buds, and we play some Magic the Gathering. Hopefully this Monday we'll be getting some games in.
And so too. It's been a month for me, so I'm like, I'm
oh my
ready
gosh,
to play.
You have to play.
Exactly.
Guaranteed locked in. You're locked in the spot.
100%. Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you coming on and chat with me about this.
Yeah.
And we'll get you on to more episodes in the future.
Heck yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.
See ya.